So welcome to a new episode of the Conscious Finance podcast. I am over the moon to welcome the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Andy Hawkins to our podcast. For anyone who knows Andy Hawkins, he's infamous in the B Corp scene. If you don't know him, you've probably spotted one of his shirts from across the city at one point. He's renowned for wearing the loudest shirts in Bristol, I think. By job title, C3PO, is that right?
Exactly right. Chief People, Planet and Purpose Officer.
Love that.
Chose that and made that up myself and has caused a few chuckles.
Genius. And how we met when you helped me with my B Corp journey. And Andy's role at the moment really has his own consultancy where he helps B Corps or aspiring B Corps get through the whole process, and he is the most experienced person in the whole country when it comes to the B Corp process. He's got 100 certified B Corps under your belt at the moment.
Yeah.
And 350 in total that you're helping, I believe, which out of 1,200 in the UK is quite a big chunk.
Yeah, 1,700 in the UK. I've helped 100. 350 I've helped in the last 3 years in terms of 100 that are B Corp, 150 that are in the queue, and another 100 are working their way towards submission. So
awesome.
It's been a ride.
Yeah, I can imagine. And from your experience and background, I guess it'd be quite good to explore that a little bit, because I had a look before this podcast. I hadn't looked at this before, but your background is quite colourful, a bit like your shirts, and you've done an awful lot. And I noticed early career working for the likes of Cadbury's and Siemens, and then sort of moving into more sustainable sector. So you can see that sort of purpose really started to take fold at that point in your career, and then into tech for good, and then finally into sort of B Corp, where you've got your own consultancy, but also you're a member of B Lab. Is that right?
B leader. I'm a B leader.
That's it.
Yeah, B Lab don't employ their own B leaders. Just kind of ethically, they don't want poacher and gamekeeper employed by the same company.
Yeah.
But we work really closely with B Lab.
Awesome. So what is it, Andy, that has led you down this path? Whether it might be, upbringing, life experiences, what is it that gives you that intrinsic motivator, would you say?
I'd say ultimately probably my mum and dad, and seeing them and how they were in their community and what they did in terms of trying to make the world a better place, in terms of their neighbours and their community. So that probably a very fundamental level would be it. As you said, I worked at Cadbury's and in various different tech roles. And then at 40, we had a gap year as a family and headed out to Cape Town and worked in a township. And instead of working for 1 year there, we stayed for 6 years. And I think that was probably when I got bitten by the do something purposeful with your life bug, well and truly. And then came back and got back into software and AI and various different things. Set up my own Tech for Good company, put that through B Corp pending. Got my B Corp pending, posted it on LinkedIn, and then the very next day, Daryl Irwin gave me a call and said, congratulations, can you give us a hand with our B Corp? So I was like,
there we go.
Yeah, all right. And in that first month, 5 different connections reached out to say, can you help us with our B Corp journey? So I was effectively hijacked into helping companies with B Corp. And here we are 3 years on, 350 plus deep.
Wow.
And away we go. So it's been a ride.
That's awesome. What a story. So I think the reason why I was keen to bring you on is really to help try to explain what B Corp is, because a lot of people don't necessarily know, and just demystify it a little bit, because I think some people see it as a burden or something that's really difficult to achieve. Some don't necessarily understand the benefits of it. Why would they invest all that time and money into the B Corp process. So I think if we can aim to solve that on this podcast, that would be great. And it'd be also great to gain your perspective on the world of finance and accounting and how that plays a role in impact as well. So to begin with, what is B Corp?
So at its most fundamental, when people ask me that question, I say B Corp is to a business what fair trade is to a jar of coffee. So when you walk into your local store, you're faced with a choice of 20, 30 different coffees. And as an ethical buyer, as an ethical consumer, my first choice level is what's fair trade, what's not fair trade. So I'll always buy fair trade if there's an option to. So it's a similar thing with a business. If you're going to work with a business, either B2B or B2C, how do you know that they're a good company? You've either got to do a load of due diligence on every single company, which, is a backbreaker, or you look for a mark. And for me, B Corp is the best mark out there in terms of just instantly knowing this company have, gone through quite a rigorous process. They've been externally audited. They've made some fundamental legal changes to their articles. They've been transparent about how they scored. Those are all values and things that I want to see as a consumer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something which consumers are now taking the steering wheel on, aren't they, in terms of what they want from the products they buy, the services they use, and also from a B2B perspective, organisations are starting to wake up to their supply chain and the importance of working with partners that are socially responsible, because they realise their impact is not just them. It's a much bigger footprint beyond their day-to-day operations internally. Yeah.
I think there's a number of things that are driving that. I think generationally, the budgets are now coming out of millennials and, Gen Zs much more now, both in terms of the recruitment marketplace, but also their buy and spend and their influence. So I think that generation has played a part in making that happen. And also you've got the David Attenborough effect, the Black Lives Matter effect, that has influenced society around their social and environmental impact goals and awareness generally. So I think that's what's driving this kind of awareness much more so.
Yeah, I think I've noticed a big change as well from the pandemic. I think a lot of people spent a lot of time looking at four walls during lockdown and thinking what is important in life, and reflecting on the decisions they're making, the career choices they're taking. And I think that's created quite a bit of an awakening just for more fulfillment, more purpose in general, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. I noticed that, during COVID and lockdown, ourselves, we had more of that time, I guess, to just think through what's important, what's really mattering at the moment. And we certainly saw that from businesses coming out of lockdown. That personal, introspection came forward into businesses as well, so that they actually came back to the table post-COVID, post-Brexit, with more of a build back better type attitude. And for a lot of companies, they had that feeling in their guts, I want to build back better. I want my company to be a better business. But a lot of them just didn't really know what to do, what was the roadmap to take me from this thought, this feeling, this dream of I want to be a better business into, well, how can I actually make that happen? And I think that intersection with B Corp is where the magic is, really.
So for somebody who doesn't understand B Corp at all, how would you explain the benefits of going through that process and the benefits of becoming a B Corp?
Yeah, so first of all, you need to measure what you're doing. So, a little bit like Slimming World,
Yeah.
you need to just step on the scales and see what the scope of the problem may or may not be.
Yeah.
And then you come up with a little bit of a plan to improve that. And that won't be an overnight transition. That will be a journey. And it happens, in the mind, it happens in the heart. You've got to have commitment to going on that journey. But eventually, you achieve your goal. And whether it's going on a fitness program, or the program that we run is called a Couch to 5K 10-step program.
Yeah.
Because people kind of get that Couch to 5K piece. It's something that's a little bit of a challenge. It's not going to be done in a couple of minutes every week. I'm going to need to commit to this new level, this new aspiration. But they come out of that at the other end a much fitter, better, stronger, healthier business. In terms of some of the benefits, we've recently completed a piece of research with Bristol University, working with a couple of master's students this summer, and one of them looked at, now you're a B Corp, what were the benefits that you derive from that?
Okay.
So we had some anecdotal evidence previously, but now that's been borne out by some actual empirical research, which included surveys and included interviews. But the main benefits that came back that were reported were, firstly, recruitment. That's obviously relevant to you.
Yeah.
Both in terms of recruiting in the first place, but also B Corp helps companies to retain their existing talent. It's all well and good to have a great front door and people coming in, but you want to make sure that you're not losing them out of the back end as well. So recruitment is definitely a regularly reported and super important piece.
Yeah.
The next thing is risk identification. None of us want to be blindsided, and if we are, it can cause a lot of pain and potentially put pay to a otherwise healthy business, just because people have not identified that they are at risk in certain areas. So going through a fairly granular process that covers a whole range of different aspects of your business is a great way of identifying and then managing and mitigating that risk. And then last but not least, there's increased sales, increased bottom line. We wouldn't ever say to a company, become a B Corp, double your sales. That wouldn't be a really great way of going into the process. But the fact of the matter is, the companies that I regularly speak to all say they've seen an uptick in their sales ultimately, and some of that is put down to the fact that they're a B Corp and consumers want to buy from and work for purposeful brands. So that's definitely the case.
Definitely, yeah. I guess along those lines as well, one thing that I wasn't expecting when going through the B Corp process was the power of that community. It's awesome, just the camaraderie that exists within B Corps, and how B Corps want to help other B Corps, B Corps want to work with other B Corps, and that network suddenly expands exponentially. And it keeps growing, right? In terms of the number of B Corps that are coming through. It's quite a powerful group to be a part of. For sure. I mean, in the UK at the moment, they're certifying around 100 new B Corps each month. Wow.
So that is, that's big growth.
Yeah.
But one of the, loveliest things I think that I've experienced in these last few years was I was running a cohort for a number of food and beverage brands as part of the Cotswold Fair supply chain. So we were running B Corp cohorts for them. And after session 1 on the cohort, one of the guys rang me up and said, Andy, I'm loving this. I'm all committed to B Corp, but 2 of the companies on the cohort are 2 of my main competitors, and I've got some concerns. So firstly, I said, well, thanks for ringing. It's great to know that, being honest. Secondly, if there's anything in there that I ask on the cohort call that you're not comfortable with, you're absolutely welcome to just change the subject radically, and I'll follow your lead. Yeah. But I said, the third thing is we're really all on this journey to help people and planet, and that's bigger than any one of our own individual companies.
Yeah.
And by session 3, they were all sharing everything.
Awesome.
So it was just great to see that happening, and that collaboration that people can learn from who they would have previously deemed competitors not to be shared with. And it's great to see those competitors now acting together and collaborating, because that is what people and planet need.
Yeah, actually, I had an episode recently with Rick Sturge. I think you might know him, actually. Yeah. And he really talked heavily on the power of that community and how you can really drive much bigger change if you buddy up with your brothers and sisters from the same sector, and actually think, right, how do we rationalize our supply chain as a unit, for example, or how do we really move the needle on what we're doing for our community? How do we team up on ESG impact so that together we can 10x what we could do alone? I think it's just a really different way of thinking, and I think that what I found is that B Corp is a bit of a family almost, and that people have got each other's backs, and as soon as you go through the process, it opens your eyes to, actually, this isn't about one business, it's not about me, it's much bigger than that. It's a community. Yeah,
it definitely is a community. It's a movement. Earlier this year, I went up to the big one in London, which was 5,000 people marching in conjunction with XR and Greenpeace and a whole bunch of other players. Business Declares helped to organise the business aspect. And apart from being an amazing networking event to meet up with a lot of my B Corp clients and go for a walk around London, it was just great being part of 5,000 people all out on the streets, acting and speaking with one unified voice. It was an amazing dynamic, really, to be part of.
Yeah, definitely. And just from your experience, you've worked with obviously multiple different sectors, different industries. You've worked with startups from scratch, like myself. And much more established business with probably bigger legacy things to unravel and redo, which might end up being more work probably than a startup might need to do when it comes to the B Corp process. I mean, what advice would you give people who are just sort of thinking, right, where do I start?
I would say initially, just like Slimming World, just step on the scales, just measure and start a journey to actually measure your impact, which is not a quick and simple thing, but just give it a go. Is there ever a right time or a wrong time? I think now is the right time. I don't think you can ever start too soon. Of the 350 clients that I've helped, 6 have been pre-startup, interestingly. And they said, shall we trade for a year? And then after we've traded for a year, should we then try and go B Corp? But I think that going through the process as you're setting a business up helps you understand your processes and policies, and helps you understand what data you will want to collect going through that first year. If they'd not done that, I think they'd have got to the 1 year stage and then, been disappointed that they'd not collected and harvested and set their systems up to collect some of the data that's needed. So I don't think there's any time that's ever too early. I don't think you can ever be too small or too young. I don't think there's any marketplace that is not appropriate for you to use the B Impact Assessment as a framework to just check out where you are. I think they're all valid. And my clients have gone from those small one-man band startups right the way up through to, the largest client I've helped has been FTSE 100, 10,000 plus people, multi-billion. Wow. And the framework has been valid across the whole spectrum. And I think I would vouch for that in terms of, actually, when we started talking, it was before I started trading with Core 3. I think it was a month or two before, just because I knew how much work would be involved in getting through the B Impact Assessment and fully understanding it and starting to put processes in place. And when launching a business, obviously you're busy, right? So it's I wanted to try and get on top of that early, but actually the benefit of it was much bigger than I expected in terms of how, not only from an ESG perspective, because that goes without saying, it's really helped me solidify our purpose and
make it authentic, but also it holds us accountable. But I think the other benefit I hadn't even thought of, it really matured our business like quite quickly, and it made us grow up, I think, a lot faster than any other startup would usually, because they wouldn't even think about HR policies, employee handbooks, how are you reviewing your staff? What are you doing to look after them in terms of the benefits? How are you reporting on your carbon footprint? All of these things, it gives you so much more rigor, and my team feel it as well. They come into the business and they're like, wow, this doesn't feel like a typical startup, because we've got so many more things in place that actually, from a especially employee well-being perspective, really benefit them. It feels like a more mature, sort of established business. So it gives you so many good things that you can take on that you otherwise wouldn't even think about, I think.
Yeah, 100% agree. So we say to those pre-startups, this is going to put in some foundational building blocks on which you can build your business.
Yeah.
And without those things would be afterthoughts, and you'll be being busy and building your business, that it will be harder for you to then, retrofit those around the business. So that's why I say, the sooner the better, really. And that doesn't just apply to pre-startups, no matter what stage you're at. I think looking at this stuff, more than anything else, the feedback we get is it was just hugely educational. We learned so much.
Massively, yeah.
That is the biggest single piece of feedback we get. And I think that learning and that education makes you that better business.
Definitely. So getting onto the process then, and what it involves, just to try to demystify that slightly. So you talked about the B Impact Assessment tool, which is the tool on the B Corp website. It's free to use. Any company can go on and use it for free, which is a great way to understand sort of where you're tracking and if you have a good chance, because it's 80 points to become a B Corp?
80 points is the threshold. It's free to use, as you say. It's on bimpactassessment.net if anyone wants to have a go. Mm-hmm. My humble opinion is I think it is worth getting somebody to help you through it. In the first year that I was working, I did quite a lot of webinars and talks and things like that, and just kind of presented on B Corp, and a lot of clients went away and were quite excited, opened up the B Impact Assessment, and very quickly kind of shut the laptop down because it looked like a bit of a beast, really, and they weren't quite ready for that. So now we tend to run workshops where we'll actually walk people through the first section of that, so they've got a little bit more of a look and feel, and they're not quite so daunted when they get to have a look at it. I think the other thing is I would never recommend opening it up and just crashing through the whole lot in one hit. There's 5 sections: governance, community, workers, environment, and customers. And it warrants taking some time to think about each of those different sections. So we look at each of those sections individually, 1 per week across the first 5 weekly sessions. Then we'll download a report. Then we'll start looking at evidence. Then we'll look at updating your articles to, solidify what you're doing into your articles in a legal way, and help you gradually build your policy and process bank. You talked about bigger businesses and smaller businesses. I've seen both ends. Smaller businesses think it's easier for a big business to go through B Corp, and big businesses think it's easier for a small business to go through B Corp. What I would say is I think they've got different challenges. So the small businesses come to the table with fewer policies and processes in place, but they're more nimble and flexible in terms of making decisions, whereas the larger companies have got a lot more process and a lot more system, a lot more policy in place, but they struggle to necessarily make those quicker decisions because they've got a much bigger range of stakeholders to take into account. They've got a wider range of employees, and they've got shareholders almost certainly as large companies that they need to go back to and have those discussions with. So it's slightly different challenges, but nevertheless, that 10-step process can get you from A to B, literally to B Corp, in a manageable and sensible, pragmatic way. I mean, you were setting up a business, you were busy, you needed to build a team, you needed to do business development, all those things. But essentially 2 hours a week, you could squeeze into your schedule without it putting you off reaching your goal of building that business. And here we are over a year later, and you're up and running and thriving.
Yeah, I think I think from my perspective, it did really help just simplify it and make it relevant for my sector, because a lot of it is very general, and it's an American language, some of it, and you're trying to translate it into what does that mean for the UK. And I think that was a massive help, just to sort of put it in layman's terms. How does it apply to my sector? What do I actually need to do? Because you could answer the question, think, oh my God, I need a spreadsheet for this, a spreadsheet for this, and evidence for that.
And that's where C3PO comes in.
Exactly. Well,
because I think C3PO is a translation droid. So that's exactly what he does.
But it was useful. I mean, all the templates you provide, everything else, it makes it easier. And this is not, it's not a sales pitch. And I'm always cautious of that. I think it's more just, hopefully, if we can inspire more people to become B Corp and, just move those barriers that people see when they open the impact assessment and think, oh my God, this is daunting, then that's a win, because the more B Corps are in the world, the better the world will be.
100%.
But yeah, I think from my perspective, when you talked about small businesses versus big businesses, I think for me, I mean, the thing I noticed the most as a small business was resource and time, and I had to do everything single-handedly as a founder whilst trying to build the business. So every single piece of evidence I've manually done myself. I don't have a office manager or a HR manager or a finance director to help me. And I guess in a big business, you've got a bit more bandwidth and support and firepower when it comes to a team around you that can actually do that, whether it's a head of CSR or a finance director or a HRD or, even an intern just helping out. So I think once you sort of scratch under the surface, it's much more achievable than you think. But I found, having done it, even though I've probably spent over 200 hours in total, I would say, on the process, because I've done it twice now, obviously with the B Corp pending and then the full shebang, and all the evidence and everything. But having done it personally as a founder, I think it's really powerful because I deeply understand it, and every single decision that we make as a business now is through that B Corp lens, and I think that's even more powerful than secondhand. Do you find that in the bigger companies are MDs and CEOs involved, or is it more sort of outsourced typically?
They do tend to, push it down to someone lower down to actually manage the B Corp process. So they'll appoint a B Corp project manager effectively. But the CEOs are always on board from the very beginning, because without that, I think it's always going to be an uphill battle.
It'll fail.
Having said that, I have had a few, really large companies come to me in the first instance and say, look, before we go B Corp or talk about B Corp, let's just use the framework and see where we are, because before we take it up to the top table, we would like to know where we're scoring and where our gaps are. So I've done a couple of those processes, which have been perfectly valid. It's a great way of using the B impact assessment, because their board are going to ask them those questions from the get-go. So much better for them to have that information to hand and say, well, we've done an initial walk through this, and this is roughly where we're at, and this is where we're off the pace, and this would be the challenges that we would have to do in order to improve, in order to achieve the 80-point threshold and beyond, because it's not just about that initial certification, it's about continual improvement over the next few years.
That's a good point for anyone listening that's quite passionate about that. It's almost a good way of presenting a business case. And we've talked about this in the past so a lot of the listeners for this podcast are finance professionals and finance directors, CFOs, or aspiring finance leaders. And we talk about how businesses, how those people in that function are well positioned to influence because they've got a respected seat at the table. They are the scorecard for the business. They have the skill set for reporting, and therefore the B Corp process and the auditing and the evidence that goes with that. The skills are really well aligned to the finance department in general, but also their job is business cases, right? So how return on investment, how what is this going to be value to us, or what will the value of this be to us? And that's a really good idea that I hadn't thought of actually. With if an FD wanted to take it upon themselves to go through the impact assessment. And then actually provide that evidence to the CEO to say, look, we've actually got 70 points. All we have to do is this.
Yeah.
And then we could become a B Corp.
Well, I think even if B Corp's not on the radar, ESG definitely is with every board.
Yeah.
And, a CFO could just go to their board and say, I want to do an ESG benchmarking exercise and use the B impact assessment as the framework that they use to measure where they're at. That would be a really low-hanging way to start.
Yeah, definitely. No, I love that. So going on to just going back to the process, sorry. What you mentioned that there's the various different sections, community, customers, employees, governance, etc. How many questions are there? Typically, how much evidence would that need and to sort of tick those? I don't like to use that word actually because it's not a box ticking exercise, but to provide the evidence to meet those standards. And how long would it take if somebody's decided, right, I'm going to start now and I want to become a B Corp, quick, sharp. How long would it take until they become a fully fledged certified B Corp at the moment, would you say?
A year.
A year?
Yeah.
That's quicker than it used to be, isn't it?
Well, it depends how much they manage to get their finger pulled out, really. So a lot of B Corps take probably a year to 18 months. But if they say we want to do it quick, sharp, we'd say, well, as long as you're willing to put the effort in on that process, you can do it in a year.
Okay.
And that is basically split into taking about 3 months on the journey to work towards submission. And then once you hit submit, it's generally about 6 to 9 months from then on in order to get your actual audit completed and get your B Corp certification. Can be a little bit longer, but that would be a simple answer of how long is it going to take. Minimum of a year.
But that audit queue is actually quite handy because it gives you time to make sure your evidence is
for sure. Yeah, you can use that. So we generally say to clients that we want them to commit to at least putting in 2 hours a week. You can't do this on 20 minutes a week. It's just not going to happen. So we ask them for 2 hours a week, which is split about half an hour doing some prep, an hour a week on a coaching call, and about half an hour prep or research afterwards. So that's a fair amount of minimum expectation that we put on there. And then across those 3 months, they'll gradually work their way through the program and get to a space where they're comfortable to actually hit submit. That doesn't mean that they are audit ready at the 3 month stage,
no,
but they're submission ready, and they will have a list of actions that they've created that they know they need to work through over the following, let's say, next 3 months, so that at the 6 month stage, they are good to go in terms of audit. Now, there's other things that I want to do, working with suppliers, working with customers, building an impact report. There's all sorts of other things they will do. So you're not going to be busy while you're waiting in that. You are going to be busy while you're waiting in that 6 to 9 month queue. There's plenty of work to be done. But what we don't want to do is get a client to procrastinate and wait until they've got all their evidence built and then hit submit, and then they'll be twiddling their thumbs a little bit while they wait in the queue.
Yeah.
So we get to an optimum time, hit submit, make sure their article's done at that stage. That's a prerequisite. And then backfill their evidence and improve their policies.
That's really nice snapshot. Thank you. I think a lot of people don't understand actually the process and how long it would take and what's involved in each milestone. So hopefully that's helps people understand it a little bit more and the time commitment needed. So what do you think is the future of B Corp? What is your vision? What is their vision? I guess you're speaking to B Lab quite regularly. What does the future hold?
Well, I think the future is bright, first of all. The fact that we're certifying 100 a month shows that there's an appetite for it out there.
Is that just the UK?
That's just the UK.
Globally, how many do you know?
Well, I mean, if the UK is 1,700 out of 7,000, that gives you a snapshot that, it's about 25%. So
got a good chunk in the UK then.
Yeah, and the UK is the fastest growing market at the moment. So a lot of other territories are looking at the UK and saying, why is it the UK is growing so fast, and what is it they're doing to engage with that? And I think that's because there's a lot of educated consumers in the UK who understand the whole people and planet piece. There's a lot of things about the UK that are not perfect, but I think we're doing pretty well on that space.
So just going back to the future, then I think you told me the other day, is it 1% of UK companies are currently B Corp?
No.
Oh.
1% of 1%.
No way.
Yeah, so at the moment there's 1,700 B Corps in the UK out of about 5 million SMEs.
Wow.
So I've read, that a tipping point would typically be 3% of the market. So 3% of 5 million is about 150,000 businesses, and we are at currently 1% of that. So the aim is to get up to that 3%, 150,000. Can you imagine if there are 150,000 B Corps in the UK? I mean, that crew could make an awful lot of noise and do an awful lot of good, even though that would only still be 3% of businesses.
Yeah.
But, that's the aspiration that I think we need to be having, and driving some strategies to get to that place. But the bottom line is, therefore, there's a huge amount to still go at. 99.9% of businesses to actually go and have a conversation with and encourage them to be better businesses.
And what an opportunity for those thinking about it now, whilst it's such a small population, to really stand out from the crowd.
Yeah, definitely comparably small. I mean, in my world, I hear about B Corps left, right and centre. And when you're a B Corp, you see B Corps out there when you're driving around and walking around and so on and so forth. But, the data is it's 0.1%.
Wow.
So there's lots to do, lots of opportunity. I also think that legislation is going to drive this. So a couple of months ago, there was some social and environmental legislation that was written into the statute book in the EU that is likely to be heading our way, and initially it will be for the bigger businesses. I understand that with some of the new financial regulations that are heading our way, but that is going to creep down the supply chain and into those smaller suppliers, and we really want companies to get on the front foot so that they're not caught out on this, that when a big supplier says, what are your ESG creds? You're not running around trying to put all that together. You can say, well, we've been B Corp certified for the last 2 years, and this is how we're growing, and this is our impact improvement plan. That's a great answer. Not, I'm not sure about that. You'll have to give us 6 months to go and check it out. You don't really want to be giving that kind of an answer to a potential customer.
No, we've had it already with multiple customers and clients who demand that now, and they say, what are your ESG credentials? And thanks to the B Corp process, we've got all the evidence there ready to go. Yeah. Just attach it and send it, and it's done.
Yeah.
So yeah, it definitely helps from that perspective. So you touched on finance and regulations there. And I know you're not from a finance background yourself, so it's nice to have a different perspective on the podcast. But as a B Corp leader, what's your perspective on the role of finance in an organisation and how that can really inspire change?
Well, let me just say loud and clear, I love accountants. Okay, I'll say that again. I love accountants, and it's out there now in public domain. I can't ever deny that. I can't ever take that back. But the reason I love accountants is because I think they probably more than any other business category have got the opportunity to be a key influencer, to be a silver bullet in this whole ESG scenario and moving it forwards. So accountants have for many, many years audited the finances, the numbers of pretty much every business on the planet. And what I would love to see is accountants approaching their clients and saying, you know us, you love us most of the time, you trust us. We've been auditing your numbers for a fair few years. Why don't you also let us measure and improve and report and audit your ESG numbers? And I think accountants are so well placed to be able to do that.
Massively.
It does mean a little bit of a mind shift and getting away from, well, we do the pounds, the pound notes, but that's what we count. We don't count carbon footprint. We don't count diversity and inclusion and employee well-being and those other metrics. But they are just metrics. And I think accountants as a profession are a better place than anyone else to really move that forward at pace.
And even in-house as well, right?
Definitely in-house. If you're the CFO, then you've got, your finger is in every pie, literally. You know all the numbers, you know a lot of the data. You're a respected person within the business. And you will need to build another team. You'll need to include HR in some of the decisions. You'll need to include other stakeholders, your operational people. But as a CFO, you are an intrinsic part of that and could well be the B Corp project manager. You could well be the focal point of that B Corp journey. That would be a very healthy place to start from.
Yeah, absolutely. Andy, thank you so much for coming on board. I think that hopefully will be just a real eye-opener for people to understand what it all means, the process, what's involved, how to try to demystify it slightly and understand it and break it down, because I think that's what holds a lot of people back. And if this episode can have one outcome, hopefully it's just more people just give it a go and just open up the impact assessment and have a play around with it. And if people are interested, Andy, are you happy for them to reach out to you directly on LinkedIn, for example?
100%.
Awesome.
Search Andy, C3PO, and you'll probably find me. or even Mr. B Corp would probably be a good place to start.
Mr. B, yeah. Brilliant. Well, thanks again, and I'm sure I'll see you soon.
Great. Thanks, Leo.
Cheers, Andy. So thanks for listening to the Conscious Finance podcast. It's really appreciated. And if you can help us increase our impact and inspire others, it would be much appreciated. All we ask is just subscribe to the podcast, give us a like or drop us a comment. It really does help get the word out there and expand our reach and hopefully inspire others to drive their impact further. Thank you.